Hello everyone, Matt from Model Minutes here and welcome back to the workbench for another unboxing. This week it's something that I've been meaning to unbox for nearly, well, about 4 years, and it is not only the Airfix 1/72 scale Sherman Firefly, but also the Tiger 1, which was released around the same time. So join me on the workbench today as I finally get stuck into both of these boxes and see what we've got. So starting off on the outside, we have it very clearly indicated to us that this is a starter set, and this was developed back when Airfix decided they wanted to make a brand new range of starter sets featuring easy to assemble kits with much easier to follow instructions, and there should be some help sheets in there as well. So the Sherman Firefly and the Tiger 1 were announced, I believe, in 2019, and if we take a look on the boxes, you'll see that we have a 2020 tooling date on there for both the design and the pack. So there was a global event in 2020 which prevented these from being released, and if I remember correctly, they didn't actually make it onto the shelves until about 2021. I had them as a pre-order and they actually arrived at the time when they were released, and unfortunately I kind of missed the boat on making my review because they've been sat in the stash and got buried by other things, but I have managed to dig them out and now they're here. So on the outside of the boxes then, the Firefly, we can see that it indicates that we've got paints included as well as a brush and some glue. We have some information about the Firefly up here, and we have a product code of A55003. Its length will be 109mm, a width of 37, and there are 31 parts included. There is one flying hour, which is a coupon. Cut that out, keep it. If you're a member of the club, you can save them up and use them to redeem more kits, or if you're not a member of the club, still hold on to them and send them to Models for Heroes to do their charitable work. We have down here that it is a skill level 1, which as a starter set it should be, because it should be fairly easy to build. The other edges feature some information in different languages, a cartograph logo which indicates that the kit has cartograph transfers and should as a result be some of the highest quality transfers out there, and as mentioned we have a tooling and pack design date of 2020, and it indicates that this was made in India and the UK. The thin edges of the box feature the same information we pretty much saw on the front, and on the back we have our painting instructions printed in full colour. You can see down here that there are 3 colours included. We've got a black, a gunmetal grey and a olive drab kind of green, and we only have 1 paint scheme included. So we will now very quickly do a comparison with the Tiger 1. Again, we've got an image of the Tiger 1 on the front of the box, information about the Tiger 1 at the top, and we have a product code of A55004. The length is 119mm, a width of 53, and there are 39 parts in this one. Again, we have 1 flying hour and a skill level of 1, given that it is a starter set. Again, on this side, we have a tooling date of 2020 and a pack design of 2020, and again, it's made in India and the UK, and we have our cartograph logo again. The back features our painting instructions once again, and again, we have 3 colours, black, gunmetal grey, and then a desert sand kind of colour. And we only have 1 paint scheme included in this kit as well, and that one appears to be a Russian example, or used in Russia in July 1944, whereas the one we have in this box is one which was in England in 1944, I would presume prior to being deployed as part of D-Day. Anyway, so we will get into the box, so let's have a look at the Sherman first. Or we might do a side-by-side comparison, actually, why not? So in here should be all of our bits, and we have paints, so I'll look at the paints first. So we've got tube glue, which is the cheapest offering that Humber will do. It's a bit more like a gel. This one still has the lid that comes off, so that's usable. I've had them before where they've been sealed shut and not usable. The paints, however, this paint looks like it's leaked. You can see the discoloration of the colour of the pot. It should be white like this one, but it's potentially leaked. And there was a problem with this design of pot when it was introduced, and the problem was that there was a little air gap and things would dry out, and as you can see, things have dried out. Unfortunately, I may be able to save this paint, but I wouldn't hold my breath. The next one is our black, and this one is a bit sticky, probably from the other one in the pack, and I'm struggling to get the lid off. And that's dried up as well, because these are the old pots from 2020. I imagine that they're all going to be dry. And this one, the gunmetal, oh, it's almost dead. You can see it's like a paste. But yeah, that's basically dead. So the problem with these pots, and I am of the understanding that more modern kits have had them changed, they've been redesigned, but the problem was when you press the lid down, it would create almost like a little bit of compression of the air inside, and their seal around the edge would not seal. So you would push it down thinking it was all the way in. The second you take your finger away, the lid would pop off ever so slightly and allow air in, and then as a result you would end up having dry paints. Seeing as it's now nearly 5 years probably since this has been manufactured, I'm not surprised that all of my paints are dry. If I had opened this originally back in 2020 when they were made and were received in 2021, it's likely that they may still be a little bit dry, but they may have been in a more usable state. But unfortunately, these are effectively no longer usable for me, and I will have to use alternatives. I do want to run a comparison against the Tiger 1 and see if those paints have also dried out, which I imagine, because they use the same pots, is going to be the same case. So we'll get that out, put that all on one side. So we'll put the Tiger on the left, and we'll put the Sherman on the right, like that, so we know what we've got. Paints in that one were unusable. Oh, interestingly, the brush is actually in the bag of this one, whereas the brush is loose in the other one. That's interesting. Wasn't expecting that. So let's take a look in this bag. Cement then. Cement on this one is refusing to undo. Yep, it's not happy. I think it's still usable. Yeah, it's still liquid, yeah, that's okay. It just was a bit glued on at the top and refusing to unscrew. It's not particularly happy about screwing back on either. Right, well, that's that one. We also have another black. If we have a look in that, and that is set. I could save that. It's wet enough to save, but it's not technically usable in its current state. It would need extra liquid adding to it. Another gunmetal, which is dried up. That's a shame. And we have our desert green, not desert green, desert yellow, 94. Where's the little lip? There it is. Yeah, so look at that. That's dry as a desert. So yeah, no good on the paints, I'm afraid. Like I said, I will give them some benefit of the doubt that perhaps had I bought this or opened these back in the day it was originally released, I may have had more luck with the paints. They may have been more liquid. But that being said, I did open and build the Spitfire starter set when that came out straight away, and I had dry paints in that as well. And that was like pretty much a couple of weeks after it was released. But yeah, if you do struggle with your paints, Airfix do have a spares department. You could take pictures of the fact that you've got dried out paints and send them off an email and request replacements, which hopefully they would give you. Personally, I'm not too fussed about the paints in this set because I have plenty of other paints that I can be using. But if this was a starter set and you'd bought it for the first time, straight off the shelf, and they had these old pots and you take it home and you realise the paints are all dry, you're going to be disappointed. And that's not the first experience you want to have of building model kits. But let's move on. Annoyingly, you can see whoever packaged the Tiger did so in such a way that they crumpled up the instructions. The transfers, as a result, are ever so slightly crinkled, but I don't think they've been damaged. So that's a fortunate, but disappointing, because that could be a problem as well. Anyways, in both of the sets, in both kits, we have one of these. Before you start, I have explored this before when we looked at the Spitfire, and you can see that it references the Spitfire in here. The skills and the techniques that are mentioned are transferable, and this is a great addition to the starter sets because it gives you tips that you may not have known before you started modelling for the first time. I know when I started modelling, I wouldn't have known hardly any of this because it wasn't introduced to me in the kits, and if I wanted to find stuff out, the internet didn't exist, so I had to go and find out from a magazine or by talking to other people who knew better. So this is a good addition. It's a little bit disappointing that it doesn't feature a tank, but it makes sense that they would do this for one kit and then introduce it to all of them, seeing as the skills and the information are transferable. However, if this was your first kit and you're building a Tiger 1, you'd go, why have I got a Spitfire on here? I'm not building a Spitfire, I'm building a Tiger. So I think that could be a little bit misleading, but I understand why they did it. So now let's move on to the instructions. As mentioned, the Tiger 1 has come with crumpled instructions, but that shouldn't really cause an issue. So the Tiger 1 has information about the Tiger 1 at the top and some hints and tips at the bottom. And then we start going through this A4 booklet. At the bottom left, we have a sprue map printed in colour, which is great because it helps us identify where our parts should be. And then up here, it's all printed in colour. Being a starter set, they wanted to make things a little bit easier for you to follow. So if you need to place glue, it's annotated in blue on this particular one, and it even tells you which sprue you need to use and the parts that you need to cut off of it. So we go through, we assemble the sides of our tank, we add the top onto the hull, and then we add our sides. There are some small details, and it has, by the looks of it, addressed the issues which the Tiger 1, the old Airfix Tiger 1 used to have, because it used to have like no cowling parts around these engine exhausts. And we carry on, we have some smaller details here which need to be added, and it tells us about painting things as well because all the colours are picked out. The turret can be assembled, and we have a stowage bin on the back, which is a improvement over the old Tiger 1 because that didn't. And then we get to the final steps where we install our turret and a few other bits and pieces, and then our tracks. And our tracks seem to come in two parts, which you just glue together and then stick on the side. It also says that this would be the stage where you would apply your decals. And as mentioned, we can see them on the back of the box. So that's the Tiger 1 instructions, and we might as well, whilst we're here, look at the Tiger 1 decals. And as mentioned, cartograph decals, very nicely printed. Not a great deal of decals there. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 transfers. So fairly simple, fairly easy to do, and I don't anticipate there being any problems applying those. The printing is good and legible, and the registration, there's nothing that's off-center, so yeah, fair enough. And the next one then, so we look at the Sherman. And again, same format as we've seen with the Tiger 1. We'll open up the page, and again, we are met with a sprue map down the bottom, but you can see that we've only got 2 sprues in this one. I think it was it 3? Yeah, it was 3 in the Tiger. So we turn over, again, this is all printed in a sort of khaki olive green, but this time we still have it annotated in blue for where the glue needs to go. We assemble the kit in much the same way, building it up like a box. And then again, we also have tracks which just get glued on the side. I think that's perhaps why they had more sprues in there, is because the tracks in the Tiger, they came as 2 parts glued together, whereas in this one they're thinner, so there's only 1 on each side. There are some smaller details which need to be added, including a controversial machine gun which goes on the front of the hull, because it is my understanding that a Sherman Firefly didn't have a hull machine gun, which makes it slightly inaccurate, and I know other people have complained about that in various places online, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I did look at some pictures before I did this unboxing and I couldn't see any hull machine guns on a Sherman Firefly, so this may not be the most accurate representation. So moving on, we add the top of our hull, then we do our turret, and we add parts in. It looks to me as if they have sort of designed an idea of having a little bit of play value in both kits, where the cannon can be lifted up and down, elevated as such, and even have the turret, when it's assembled, be inserted in such a way that it can traverse left and right. Naturally, the tracks come as one piece and they will be fixed. It's not like the old-fashioned ones where they came as rubber bands and had an idea of rotating, but I'm not sure how realistic it was to actually get them to rotate. The transfers in this boxing are a little bit more complex. There are a few more than there were in the Tiger, so if you don't like doing transfers, the Tiger would be the one to go for. In this we've got some stars and serial numbers and other bits and pieces, but again, not a massive amount. Printing again is really good. I think the text may even be legible in these ones here, but it's hard to make them out because it's white and on a blue background, so it's quite hard to see that. But yeah, decals look pretty good. Let's now look at the plastic parts. So they both come in bags, and you can see that unlike other offerings, we have them molded in color. The Tiger one is molded in this sort of sand color, and I think that's already been opened slightly. That bag hasn't been sealed all the way across, so that was a worry. You could have lost parts. That was the case. Unless, of course, I've already looked at this kit back in the day, maybe. That's possible. So this one is molded in a sand color, and this one is molded in a green color. So you wouldn't necessarily have to paint your tanks if you didn't want to. You could just assemble them, pick out like the tracks or whatever, and then stick your transfers on and call it a day. So let's look at the Sherman briefly. We get 2 sprues as mentioned, and we can see on here that the Sherman does feature a reasonable level of detail. Bearing in mind this is of course a starter set. Starter sets from Airfix are generally considered easier to build and may as a result feature slightly less details than you would expect to see on a traditional kit. But the details that are represented are pretty nice, and it does look better than the old vintage version that I built many years ago. There isn't anything in the way of flash, however it probably is worth noting that the plastic is quite dense and it feels a little bit greasy, so I would probably recommend a wash of soapy water to remove any mold release which may be left on that one. But yeah, that sprue looks pretty good. That was sprue A. And then on sprue B, we've got our single piece tracks, which makes assembly so much easier, especially for a beginner, because all you have to do is paint it and stick it on. And also we have the rest of our details, so our turret parts and other little bits and pieces. Generally speaking, the moulding is very nice and crisp with no flash that I can see on the parts that will need clean up. So yeah, that's pretty good. And the Tiger, as mentioned, also has single piece tracks, apart from the fact they come in 2 halves and will need to be glued together. So I hope that we don't have too much of a noticeable seam down the center after we've done that, because I think that would be a little bit annoying. But we will talk a little bit about tracks in a little bit. This second sprue has our main turret. Again, the plastic is basically the same as that one. It's a little bit greasy, it's quite dense. There isn't anything in the way of flash that I can see, and the mold quality is really quite good. And then finally we move on to the last sprue, which has our main body, and again we've got some molded on details. The details are somewhat more refined than the Tiger that I built a little while ago, and actually I have that one here. So I built the vintage Tiger 1. This is 1/76 scale, not 1/72. Obviously it's going to have some similarities because there's only so many Tigers you can sort of design, but I think you'll notice in the sort of molding, the molding on the new version is considerably more refined, and the fact as well that this one didn't have a stowage bin on the rear, whilst this one does now have a stowage bin which goes on the back, just makes it more accurate representation. So that's why I did mine as a sort of disabled and destroyed and abandoned version. This one came with rubber band tracks, and I found that very fiddly, so the fact that they've introduced tracks as effectively single pieces makes assembly of this kit so much easier. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We had our 3 sprues in sand color for our Tiger 1 and our 2 sprues in green, and there is a different, or I want to say different because it's based on the same tooling. There is another offering of both of these kits where they come with extra sprues and they have extra details and different tracks on there. So the tracks here are single pieces we've seen, but there was another offering for more serious modelers, which has more parts. I think they almost effectively double the part count by having the wheels as separate parts, and then the tracks come as separate entities which you have to wrap around them, as you know, in different stages. And also they come with extra bits and pieces. I think the Sherman, for example, comes with extra, I think it's like jerry cans and ammo boxes and extra tracks which you can put on as armor, whereas I think this comes with like cables and other bits and pieces which you can put on to make it look a little bit more refined. So there is a different version for that out there, and it comes with 2 paint schemes. But if you are looking for those, at the moment I'm making this video, it would seem that both the more refined version and the starter set version are retailing for £11.99. I don't remember what the price was when I originally bought this. I think it may have been just shy of £10. So naturally over time prices have crept up a little bit. But yeah, I think maybe it's time to start wrapping this one up. We have 2 very nicely tooled kits. Granted, I think this one has a Hull MG, which it shouldn't have, which I know some people have been annoyed about. The transfers included in the kits look absolutely great. The instructions are easy to follow, being a starter set. I do enjoy the fact that all of your painting instructions are in full colour. It is disappointing, however, that all of the paints in my offerings here were not fit for use, but I'm not too worried about that because I can get other paint, or I have other paint already in the stash. Both of them came with brushes. I totally forgot to mention that. They were number 4s, and number 400 brushes are sort of your standard. They're not the finest tips, but they do work, and they should work perfectly fine. These kits have been available in, as mentioned, in a slightly more complicated version with extra details, with 2 different paint schemes, and they have also been available as part of a sort of combat set where they've been fighting each other. But it was more likely that you might see this version, especially if you're in the UK, as part of a gift set. Which way around is it? So the gift sets, we see them in discount supermarkets, you know, sort of every Christmas. I've picked up a couple. Inside of here is exactly the same stuff that you have inside your standard starter set. However, the only difference being is that you don't get your top sort of flappy bit for your box. Everything else is the same. You get 3 paints, you get a brush, glue, same instructions, same plastic parts. And usually, if you get these at that seasonal period, these are usually a little bit cheaper, usually around sort of the £6, £7, £8 kind of mark. So that's why I picked them up, because you can do different things with them and you can mess about with them, especially as they're starter sets. Technically, these are gift sets. These are the starter sets, but they're basically the same. As a side note, I just want to point out that Airfix has had the Tiger 1, as we've previously seen in my desert diorama, and a Sherman. I've got the Sherman Calliope here, based off of the older Sherman design. If you ever see a Sherman or Tiger or a combat set which features them, but it's 1/76 scale, it will not be the tooling that you have in this box here, because these are redesigned to be 1/72. They're much more modern tooling, and if you go for something like this, it won't be that tooling. It will be an old vintage version, especially vintage classic up there. And in this particular case, the Sherman is a 1961 tooling. So if you wanted the modern one, make sure you go for the 1/72nd version. If you go for 1/76, it will be the old tooling, as a warning, because I know someone did mention it to me a little while ago. They bought a set, it had a 1/76 tank in it, and they were disappointed that it wasn't the new one, despite the fact the new tooling existed. But that would have meant that it wouldn't have fitted technically scale wise with the other 1/76 items in the box. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm probably going to do these 2 kits as starter set builds, just build them up, stick the decals on. I'm probably going to have to find different paints, but I will hand paint them and all that sort of stuff. The other 2 versions I've got I know for definite that I'm probably going to do the Tiger 1 in a different paint scheme because I have extra decals from my previous Tiger 1, so I can do that, and I might try out some different paints with it. Not sure what I'll do with the other Sherman though. I do have a couple of them lying around, so I might do something. But yeah, on the whole, pretty decent starter sets. Wouldn't be a bad introduction to the hobby if you were brand new, and on the whole, they look to be fairly accurate, and there are more complicated versions out there if you wanted to do something which would test you a little bit further. Naturally, of course, we have mentioned the Hull MG, and there may be other inaccuracies that I don't know about. So if you do know about them, drop them down in the comments below. A little bit disappointed that the paints are all dry, but as mentioned, these are the old style pots, and you shouldn't see this happen in your current offerings. They have redesigned the pots and they should still be wet. They should still be usable. If they're not usable, make sure you contact the Airfix Spares team and get a replacement sent out so that you can build your kits. And on that bombshell, I think it's probably time to end this one here. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of my review and whether you thought my assessment of this kit was fair, or both kits was fair. And as always, I'm open to other suggestions, to other things that you might like to see on the workbench at some point. As always, a quick shout out to my Model Club members for the extra support they give the channel. Massive thanks to these guys on screen. If you'd like to join them, take a look at the links in the description. There are other ways to help support the channel if you'd like to do so, and again, full information is under the video. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you on the workbench again next time.